Today, you're going to see the most depressing movies in history. There's no room here for happy endings or miraculous redemptions. You won't find hope, only pain. What you'll encounter is rawness, realism, and a brutally honest look at human suffering. These films don't just make you sad, they leave you empty. Today on Cine Prime. Paris, Texas is, along with Goodfellas, my favorite film. In it, we follow the story of Travis, a broken man who has decided to stop speaking. At first, we don't know his past, but what we do know is that he's lost everything. He's a man who's aware that he hurts everyone around him, and himself, and that leads us to one of the most human and emotional endings in cinema. It's true that, unlike the rest of the films coming up on this list, Paris, Texas isn't a hopeless film, but it is profoundly sad. It's melancholic, nostalgic, devastating, but above all, human. The ending doesn't destroy you, but it leaves a deep wound, because sometimes, in a dire situation, the best choice is still devastating. It's a beautiful, transcendent, contemplative film. Its sadness doesn't come from trauma or explicit tragedy, but from life itself, from that feeling of having lost something irretrievable. The Deer Hunter isn't just a war film, it's a film about the aftermath of war. It introduces us to a group of working-class friends in Pennsylvania, full of life, dreams, and simple routines. But everything changes with the Vietnam War. What begins as a story of camaraderie slowly turns into a nightmare that strips away everything that defines these characters. Their innocence, their humanity, their ability to return home as the same people. The film doesn't dwell on battle scenes, but on their consequences. The most painful part isn't what happens in Vietnam, but what happens afterward. How laughter is replaced by silence. How distance settles between friends who used to be brothers. The Deer Hunter is long, slow, but every minute weighs like a slab. And its ending, without any gimmicks, is a collective lament for everything that was lost. The Elephant Man is one of the saddest and most moving films ever made. Directed by David Lynch, though far from his usual surrealist style, it's a deeply human story about dignity and cruelty. John Merrick is a man with a severe deformity, exhibited as a monster in traveling sideshows. But behind that terrifying appearance is a sensitive, intelligent person with a desperate need for affection and respect. What makes this film so devastating isn't just how society treats him, but how he internalizes that rejection. Every attempt to fit in, every compassionate look he receives, feels like a small victory in a world that has already condemned him. The film doesn't exploit misery or sensationalism. It forces us to look beyond the physical, to confront our own capacity for empathy. And its ending, beautiful and devastating in equal measure. Not because it's grandiose or excessively tragic, but because it understands that sometimes the only escape from pain is to surrender with dignity. That peace for some only comes when everything else has been lost. Million Dollar Baby begins as an underdog story, like so many others. A young woman with nothing, marked by poverty and abandonment, finds in boxing and a solitary trainer a reason to keep fighting. But what seems like an inspiring fable turns into one of the most heartbreaking films Hollywood has ever produced. Clint Eastwood doesn't tell a story of victories, but of irreparable losses. What hits hard isn't the ring, it's life itself. The relationship between the protagonists, beautiful but fragile, is crossed by pain, guilt, and the purest form of love in its most tragic expression. What's truly brutal isn't what happens, but the rawness with which it's accepted. How love can lead you to make impossible decisions. How the greatest act of tenderness can become a silent sentence. Million Dollar Baby doesn't seek easy tears. It leaves you in uncomfortable silence, morally uncomfortable, emotionally shattered. It's an open wound that never heals, a story that destroys you, and offers no comfort. Dancer in the Dark isn't just a tragedy, it's an emotional punch that slowly crushes you. Lars von Trier builds a devastating story about Selma, a poor, nearly blind immigrant woman who lives to protect her son and escapes the pain of reality through musicals she imagines in her head. But in this world, there is no escape. Everything surrounding Selma is injustice, abuse, betrayal. Innocence and kindness here save no one. What makes this film so brutal is how it drags you into the abyss with unbearable sweetness. Björk delivers a performance of extreme vulnerability, almost real. It hurts just to look at her. Every step Selma takes toward her end feels like watching someone walk blindfolded into fire. And when the climax comes, no music softens it. Only silence remains, horror, helplessness. Dancer in the Dark doesn't break your heart. It rips it out and forces you to keep listening to it beat on the floor. Come and See is a cinematic experience that cuts through the soul and doesn't let you come out intact. Set amid the brutality of World War II, the film follows a Belarusian boy who witnesses the absolute horror perpetrated by the Nazis in his village. But don't expect graphic violence. The worst is felt in every silence, every vacant stare, every step toward destruction. The film doesn't just show war, it shows how war destroys innocence and annihilates humanity. What makes Come and See so devastating is its relentless rawness and the perspective of a child slowly losing all hope. The atmosphere is heavy, the discomfort constant, and the pain real. There is no happy ending, only the echo of a tragedy that must never be forgotten. It's a voiceless scream that forces you to look, to remember, and to feel the weight of history in a way that's as depressing as it is raw. Grave of the Fireflies is not only one of the most powerful animated films ever made, it's also one of the most devastating. The story follows two siblings, Seita and Setsuko, trying to survive in wartime Japan after losing their mother in a bombing. From the very first minute, you know this won't end well, but nothing prepares you for the way the film slowly dismantles your soul. There are no monsters, no clear villains, only indifference, misery, and war doing their silent work. What's most heartbreaking isn't death, it's life in ruins. The helplessness, the hunger, the look in a little girl's eyes who doesn't understand why the world is falling apart. The film isn't sentimental, it doesn't manipulate, it simply shows, with brutal honesty, how war rips the purest things from existence. It's cinema that hurts, that leaves a scar. And when it ends, you don't cry for what you saw, you cry for what you'll never be able to forget. Melancholia isn't just a film, it's the purest, most accurate portrait of depression in the history of cinema. Lars von Trier wrote it while going through one of the darkest times of his life, in a deep depression, and he managed to reflect it perfectly on screen. From the very first frame, everything is destined to disappear. There's no hope, no salvation, only beauty, chaos, and resignation. The story revolves around two sisters, Justine, who suffers from depression, and Claire, who suffers from anxiety. The film shows how Justine, living through the apocalypse in her mind, feels utterly miserable on her wedding day because the happiness around her doesn't match her inner world. But once the end of the world arrives, death, complete collapse, Justine finds a certain peace because at last her external world reflects what she's been feeling inside. What's truly shocking is how the film portrays her mental state. The apathy, the inability to feel, the certainty that everything, even beauty, is doomed to vanish. Amour is perhaps Michael Haneke's most emotionally devastating film. He's known for cold, cruel, almost surgical movies, but with Amour, he tore the soul apart with brutal honesty. The story is simple, but unbearable. An elderly couple deeply in love, until she suffers a stroke and begins to deteriorate. What follows isn't a tragedy, it's life itself. Raw, inevitable, devastating. The film is an extremely honest portrait of aging. No melodrama, no music. Just static shots showing the decline, the everyday, the real drama. It's unbearable in its realism, its tenderness, its helplessness. This isn't a film about romantic love, but about real love, the kind that stays when everything else is gone. And when the end comes, you don't cry because it's tragic. You cry because it was inevitable. Because it hurts to accept that this is what awaits us. Because the end of life is not beautiful. Requiem for a Dream is the greatest anti-drug campaign in history. No other film captures the descent into hell with such visual, emotional, and psychological brutality. Darren Aronofsky creates a dark opera about addiction, loneliness, and the desperate need to fill a void that seems impossible to satisfy. 4 characters, 4 dreams, 4 nightmares. What starts as a story of broken hopes becomes an unbearable spiral of physical, mental, and emotional degradation. Every shot, every montage, every piece of music repeated like an obsessive tick pulls us further into an abyss from which there's no escape. But what makes it truly devastating isn't just what it shows, it's what it destroys in the viewer. The ending is, without exaggeration, one of the most devastating in film history. There's no redemption, no comfort, only emptiness. Requiem for a Dream doesn't just hit you, it pulverizes you. And when the credits roll, you can't help but sit in silence, wondering if you'll ever feel truly okay again.